My name is Kuldip Ardawa and I'm originally from Punjab, India. Currently in BC, Canada, after living for 30 years in the UK. My father came to the UK in the early mid 1950s and my mother and I came when I was 13 to join my father in England. It was a very difficult time at the time because England was being rebuilt after the war and there were very few ethnic people who were living in the UK. I think we were about the 14th or the 15th family in our hometown, which was Wolverhampton. And I grew up with mostly Western society. As I mentioned before, that there was very little immigration that was happening at the time. I went to school in Wolverhampton and it was a very difficult experience because the people looked different, they dressed different, and they were intrigued by my colour of my skin and also because I was wearing a traditional Punjabi suit. The children were very, very inquisitive, and so was I, as to why the colour of their hair was blonde and why the colour of their hair was orange, and they were wondering why my skin was brown, and they even went to the extreme that they would try and rub fingers on my arms to see if it was colouring. And so for both sides, for the children there and myself, it was a cultural shock. During my education at the local school, which was for girls only, in those days you had the secondary schools as girls only or boys only. There was no integration in the different schools. So coming to the UK at the age of 13, it didn't give me a lot of time to study or to catch up, but however, much to my parents' surprise and my teachers, I was a very fast learner, very conscious and very focused in succeeding, because the language was so different, the lifestyle was so different, and the food was so different. We could not get any ethnic food that we can get every day without batting an eyelid. So as thought at it, I was the top 3 in all of my subjects, and as well as sports I was very interested in. But my parents thought, okay, it's nearly the end of the school, so they started looking for a match for me. Myself and my teachers were very, very disappointed. So my teachers had great hopes for me, and I had hopes of my own to continue with the education and follow a passion of mine of having a good career. My father had different ideas. He was a traditional Punjabi father who had done his responsibility, helped to raise me, and it was time to move me on. In those days, girls were married by the time they were 18, 19 at the latest, and my school were very, very disappointed, and my father was summoned to the school a few times, hoping that the teachers and the principal would be able to change his mind. But my dad was adamant that his daughter wasn't going to be sent to university, and the school were disappointed because I would have been their first Punjabi woman, girl from India to go to university. So comes to the end of the school year, I left, and within 6 months I was married, arranged marriage, and that was the start of another chapter of my life. I was my future in-laws, they were from India, and they'd only just recently come, so they were having the transition the same as myself, but the only difference was that I was able to help them in a much better way. So when I say I was able to help them in many ways, they had no command of the language, and it was very difficult for our neighbours, and they were all elated when they found out that I could read and write and I was very fluent in English. So in the late early 1960s, there were very few people who could speak English, read or write, or fill in forms for them. So there was a constant stream coming through our door for people with inquiries, people who wanted to be taken to the doctors, or people who wanted forms filling in, or simply just interpreting for them. However, this went up and my passion grew. I felt that I was of some value. I felt that my education had helped so many people. And that was the beginning, unbeknown to me, that I will be, for the rest of my life, that I will be involved in the community, for the community. My husband was very sympathetic and he was very supportive that I was able to help somebody else, and he had a philosophy thinking and saying that if you can help somebody, you should go and out help somebody, because your gift of helping people is not available through everybody. So this went on until quite some time, and then gradually the community, the new immigrants, they managed to. So my in-laws and they were totally against it, or they started getting against it because it was taking a lot of my time away from the home. But my husband was very, very supportive in every aspect. And then around about this time, my daughter was born, and it was a great moment in time because, children, nobody realizes what happiness and what extra joy they bring until you've had a child of your own. And she was a beautiful little girl. And then 2 years later, I had my second child, and then 5 years later, I had my third child. And at the same time, it was a very learning experience for myself, but at the same time, I was looked upon by the community, and especially women, that, I was a role model, which I didn't expect that I was, but they saw me as a role model. And there was a time when, things got a little bit difficult trying to get 3 children to school and back. And at that time as well, my husband fell seriously ill. And I was told that he would be not allowed to get out of his hospital bed for at least 6 months. And it was a struggle because I had 3 children under the age of 6. That brought me to my next chapter, was that how do I get my children to go and visit my husband all day and carry the things. So my husband suggested that I should learn to drive. There's a car in the garage, and at that time it was unheard of women learning to drive or even driving. There was only one other woman, Punjabi woman, that was able to drive, and I had to think about it because my in-laws were very traditional and very against the fact that why do I need to learn to drive. What they didn't understand and realize that here I was with a dilemma, carrying 3 children on 2 buses to visit my husband in hospital, and that would have been done for at least 6 months. So secretly, my husband was pushing me to learn to drive. My in-laws were showing their anger, if you like to say, that no woman of their household was going to be learning to drive or be seen to be driving. Somehow or others, for some reason, they thought it was degrading. But I took the advice of my husband and learned to drive, and it was the greatest thing that I had ever done, and I felt really valued because since leaving school I never had the opportunity to use my motivation and my inspiration, not only to enhance my own life but also help other people. I was offered a job as a support worker in the local community centre. Again, I had a lot of response from my in-laws and saying that, this is going to bring shame on our family, that people will think that we can't support you if you go out to work, so, we'd rather you didn't. So I asked if I could volunteer, and they said, well, whether you volunteer or whether you're working is the same thing. So I thought, here I need to do a bit of work. We are in a multicultural society. We are looking to improve ourselves. We've left our country for a better life. And he was an opportunity for a better life. And for some reason, or some misunderstanding, I realized that I had to do a bit of work. So I sat my father-in-law down, who was the head of the household, as we all know, and what the father-in-law said, right, was the thing that happened. So I sat him down and I explained to him what the community support worker would be doing, how it helps people, what's the difference in people coming to our house and getting the same help, whereas I'd be sitting in an office and people wouldn't have to come through our home anymore. So lucky for me, it must have been a good day that day, that he actually gave his blessings and said, okay, you can do that. While I was at the support office as a community support worker, I was very quickly asked if I would move up a position, and I was the Chief Development Officer at the time. And again, it was building relationships with community. And my boss and the city that employed me saw that I had the passion, and I also had the knowledge, and I also had the ability to keep boundaries and policies in place. So I was given the responsibility as the first Punjabi woman to be the development officer for the city, and I developed a couple of programs which were of a great benefit to the community. One was housing, the other was a transition home for women who were fleeing domestic violence. I worked very closely with the police, with social services, and also in the community's mindset was that social workers break people's homes up. And that was another awareness that I had to clarify, and worked very hard to say, we're not here to break homes, we're here to join homes and also empower you to make better decisions. Maybe the decision was at one time not thought through. So raising awareness was another thing. And the other thing that used to come to my desk was women of all ages, young girls who were 17, 18-year-olds, young women, young mothers, mature women. And they used to say, Kuldip, you have learned to drive. We want to be able to learn to drive, but we can't because there is no Punjabi speaking instructor. And so why don't you do something for us? And I thought to myself, you know, I've got to work. So why not do a job that the community is going to be more enriched by, and also help somebody else in another way. So I applied for my Ministry of Transportation application and qualified as the first Indo-Canadian Punjabi woman that was a drive instructor in my hometown of Huddersfield. With my help and with my skill set and my understanding, I moved on and opened my own driving school. I was working 7 days a week, 14 hours, sometimes 12 hours a day, to accommodate the need that was there, that was needed for women and girls who wanted to learn to drive. And honestly, that is the most rewarding and satisfying job that I did since leaving school. It was the fact that I opened many doors of opportunities for women, girls. They could travel further for their social, for their educational, for their employment. Then they could travel even late at night because, you know, England was in a transition. People didn't understand the new immigration that was coming in, and the immigrants didn't understand the English, so there was a lot of misunderstanding, and waiting for a bus late at night wasn't ethical at the time. So the driver's license in their pockets gave them a huge boost of confidence, and also broadened everybody's horizon. And all I did was just listen to the need of the community. And as I said previously, there was only one other woman that could learn to drive, who was driving, and I was the second one, but the first Punjabi woman to be a driving instructor. From there, I went on and learned that there was a lot of need for multicultural language speaking people. And as well as raising my own children, I was selected as a regional organizer to take part in youth exchanges. Now, this youth exchange was to help young people from the age of 18 to 25 to integrate into the European market. And this was, again, a very eye-opener for myself. And again, I was the first Punjabi woman to take a group of 11 people across to Germany, across to Germany on a youth exchange with 5 other countries, and the same sort of ratio from 18 to 25, they would be introduced to the social side, the housing, the educational, the housing, and generally for what was available for people who wanted to start afresh, or they weren't sure, or the opportunities weren't there. And as a European common market, they were allowed to settle in any of the 11 countries. And I was very humbled and very appreciative of the fact that I was selected out of the whole of the region to lead these 11 children, 11 young adults, I should say, to Germany, where it was our base. And then we met up with the same sort of young people from France, from Switzerland, from Denmark, from Germany, from England. That was a beautiful experience because, again, I felt that my ability to explore, to step out into the unknown and help these people, these young students and young people. So this initiative was didn't cost anybody anything, but it was the good nature and the good intentions of the European Common Market, especially Germany, which provided jointly with other countries for the financing. And that gave me another platform that there was a lot of need in the community, and I got the opportunity to work for what they call the United Nations Agency as a settlement officer, and it was a settlement officer, and United Nations were the overall organisation for asylum seekers and immigrants who were fleeing countries like Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and part of my job was to screen them and also ensure that they were safe and they were able to either go back to their own country, or they had the opportunity to prove themselves that it was too dangerous for them to go back. All this was happening, and all this transition of asylum seekers and refugees came about when Saddam Hussein's regime was making people difficult to stay in their own countries. That was another enjoyable and fulfilling position that I had. Again, I felt very humbled and very, very privileged to have the opportunity to work with such great people who struggled and came to the shores of Great Britain. So working with the refugees and asylum seekers, part of my role was to ensure that they were safely housed and also introduced to education and also for sports, and literally just getting themselves better integration and better understanding of the English way of life. Working in the Liberals office, it was a great opportunity and great fulfillment for myself, simply because it was another way of helping people and another way of learning about the new country that I had made my home, and also people of Canadian origin, And the strange part was that many times the Canadian phrases and the English phrases or terminologies didn't connect. The Canadians couldn't understand my English and I couldn't understand their English, such as they used to say, "You bet." And I used to say, "Well, I never mentioned anything about betting." Or they'd say, "Oh, I hear you." And I thought, am I speaking too loud that they're feeling that I'm talking too loud and they're telling me that I hear you? Eventually, I figured out that they are, instead of saying like the UK English speaking would say, "Oh, okay, oh, I understand, oh, that's fair enough," right? They were saying, "You bet," and "Oh, I hear you." So that was, very laughable later. But at the time, I felt, am I embarrassing somebody? And subsequently, through my experience there, I wanted to get more Canadian experience. And I did a bit of research as to where I could get this valuable experience. And I found that the South Asian women and the Indigenous women that were incarcerated in Matskewi prison, corrections place, they didn't have their families to come and visit them. So I thought I'm going to make sure that I go and visit them. We all make mistakes. We all make bad choices, but we should not sort of lock somebody away and forget about them. So 3 times a week I used to, after work, I used to go and talk to the wardens and, did counselling and also teach people basic life skills such as computers and filling in forms and whatever. And that was really rewarding, but there needed to be something else, I felt. And I spoke to the warden and they had a meeting and I was allowed to take the Punjabi women to the local Gurdwara where they would do seva, right, and they would listen to the kirtan and then at the end of the day come back to the correction centre. And many times, the women used to say, "Well, what would you do if we run away?" And I said, "Well, I won't chase you. I won't look for you. I will just call the 911, and once they will catch you. If they don't catch you sooner, they'll catch you later, and you will lose all your rights of parole." So that was another experience that I really valued because I was able to put my skills and my passion into reality. Soon, as I was going down the lane, I was thinking all the time, how can I improve? How can I improve myself? How can I improve my life? How can I improve my family? And each time it came back, the community won. I always gave my time to the community, which not only did I have the opportunity to enrich people who seeked my help or wanted my support, but it also was enriching and broadening my horizons of what life could be. So from the Liberals, I was offered a position by the NDP, and as an inquisitive person or a person that wants to treat everybody equally, I thought, well, why not, right? And I was employed as the constituency assistant to Sue Hamill of the NDP, and it was a great pleasure working with such a great lady. And I learned a lot. There was very much similarities, and we had opportunity to go to the legislature a few times, which was very interesting. And I don't think I would have got the opportunity if I hadn't worked for the government to actually have the tour and also the guidance of the big house, the legislature. Great place, very well, and very educational, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. As I was working with the NDP, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I got people from with immigration problems, housing problems, ICBC problems, health problems, you name it. And again, it enriched my life and my knowledge. And And the thing that people used to come in for was because they were sort of at such a difficult stage that they couldn't make a decision whether they should pay the bills or they should pay for food. And many times, as we all know, food was bypassed and bills and responsibility was taken care of.